Welcome to today's episode of Heartbeat, Tactical Insights for CIOs. I'm your host, Michael Summer. Today, our guest is Deepak Sakdeva, a seasoned Chief Information and Technology Officer who has transformed global operations through innovation strategies and cutting-edge technology. With over 2 decades of experience, Deepak has led teams of over 200 people, managed a $4 billion worth of M&A and private equity transactions, and driven digital transformation across industries like financial services, fintech, and retail. An engineer at heart and a trusted advisor to CIOs, Deepak's expertise in technology, cybersecurity, and regulatory compliance has made him a key player in shaping the future of business. So Deepak, can you please tell us a little bit about your background and how you got started as a CIO?
Yes, absolutely. I was in technology leadership positions in companies such as General Electric and Sabre. And the companies would be challenged into very unique ways, which needed a solution which was beyond technology. And it was more about the business solution. It's about finding technology as a tool set rather than finding a solution based on the technology. So it was the other way around. And I saw that this is a common pattern with the people who have an affection to one technology, and then they just try to fit in the technology into a business solution. And then I started thinking about it that why don't I actually start understanding the business itself and then work with the CEOs and see that what are you trying to solve? And then defining the problem was always a challenge. So once I started to work with them without offering any solution at that time and understanding that what is that something which they want to achieve overall. And then I started to find out the tool sets for that. Now, I knew more than 500 different tools to work with, but then there is always somebody else who's doing somewhat better and they are less known, etc. So I started to become more innovative. And the best thing to do as a technologist is to understand that what you're solving and do it in such a manner that you can remove yourself from that position overall. And that kind of got the attention of a lot of people. And I became a favorite to do the things which CEOs and the CFOs wanted to do to solve something and then do it in such a manner that we can detach ourselves and then it can be repeating kind of technology, and then it will self-sustain. So the cost of operation was very low, and the implementation and the deployment cost was also very optimized. And once it's done, then it's done with that. Took a journey where I started to not only look at the financials beyond technology, but also the private equity investments and how somebody wants to go to the core and strip down the cost and then go beyond that.
Thank you. That's a really good insight. And coming in with an objective approach and not trying to get a technology to fit to the problem, but coming in with a clear understanding really opens up opportunities. So that's a really good perspective. Thank you. So what was one of the biggest lessons that you've learned since starting your career?
I would say the people aspect of it is actually the biggest lesson. I think what happens is that whenever somebody develops a technology in any company, they want to preserve it. There is this kind of mindset that I want to keep this technology, and there is an economic life of every technology. I have been in this technology field, finance field for the last 20 years or so, and I have seen cycles of it. So my biggest lesson is to understand that there's an economic life of something which could be 2 years, which could be 3 years, maybe 5 years. But if you keep that on for a long period of time, then to maintain it, there is a huge technical debt which you have to pay. And to reduce that, you need to do trade-offs. There are no solutions as such. There are only trade-offs. If you do this, then this is going to happen. So but it is very interconnected with the people and the feelings of the people. And that's what I think is the primary motivation for that. Me, myself, can only navigate into a one direction, but then I cannot do every bit and aspect of it. So I need to inspire the people, to motivate the people to see that if they'll release this and then hold on to the next thing, then it'll be a kind of career journey and a career path for them. So when I connected that human element to that technology transformation, that something just worked wonders for me. And that's my lesson.
Fantastic. So speaking of transformation, The world is shifting quickly. We are seeing a lot of innovation coming down the pipeline. Digital transformation is at the forefront of a lot of CIOs. And we're also seeing generative AI with new models coming out, which seems like it's evolving every week. What are 2 or 3 impactful podcasts or video series that you listen to in order to stay in front of the curve and to be able to provide true insight to your clients?
It does switch in different ways. For me, personal learning, it's less about the podcast, but it's more about learning something on the Coursera or Udemy. So it is a version of a podcast because a lot of the courses has video recordings of the individuals who have gotten to different places and they're speaking to it. One very interesting, which I came across, I think it was on LinkedIn actually, from one of the founders of itself. So he does not work there anymore since Microsoft acquisition and passes on the torch. And he spoke that what are the roles and responsibilities of the CEOs and what is the weight of their words, the colors and everything. So that LinkedIn, Coursera, I would put them in one category. The other one, which I would say I occasionally use, is Wall Street Journal. And the Wall Street Journal has podcasts which are basically talk about the products and its utility to the world. Now, it is the end side of it, but not the starting side of it. But I see that how people consume technology, whatever the services are or the products are. So that's something which I quite a bit of a fan of. And then finally, I would say I follow many things on the YouTube. There are YouTube channels where I follow and see that. So it's not one topic or the other, but it's like the AI, machine learning, how to basically increase the revenue and growth of a company in such a manner that you are acquiring new business and then penetrating into the new market. Sometimes the topics are the GDPR or data governance side of it. All those topics I just consume from the YouTube side of it. This is something, 3 things which I would say I'm using it.
All right, thank you. So regarding digital transformation and innovation, what do you see is one trend that is being overlooked?
I think the utility factor of technology is not looked. There are a lot of startups which are stealth startups or many things which are they're doing, they get the funding, health related things also which are happening. There is just overwhelming amount of data which has a very less utility factor. Even if you are, I'll give an example quickly, is that once when you do the health metrics and you look at all the things which are happening, you are only looking at 3 or 4 things. Or in aviation, there are like 6 things only, which you are just measuring altitude, attitude of the flying. So there is a finite number of things which you're looking. But if you have a lot of things, 100 things to look at, then you are not invested into those. So I think utility factor is something which is overlooked. Other thing which I would say is that people create models, financial models or AI systems in such a manner without any regard of the data ownership. What happens is that when this data ownership issues occur, then the people are surprised. People feel a little bit cheated on it, and then there is no recourse of that. I think a trustworthy system needs to be upfront about it. There should not be leading on factor to that. And again, a customer will come in any form and shape if you upfront about it. So that's something which I would say is a second thing. Third thing I would say is that there are technology-wise, infrastructure-wise, many people are just using the older systems and then refurbishing them with a layer on the top of it. I call this as a technical debt because they're going to do it and then just move on eventually. But I think if people are just upfront about it, and then that initial cost over an economic life of say 3 years is going to be smaller than the actual cost which somebody else is going to just build from a hodgepodge of things which they're building it. So that's something which I see that quite a lot as well. It's really hard to maintain, by the way.
Fair enough. You mentioned a few things. One was the technical debt and really the lift and shift mentality of simply replicating what you've always had and incorporating that into a new platform. And then you spoke of data and data governance. In your opinion, who's responsible for the cleanliness of data? Is it business or IT?
I think it's a joint responsibility. The execution part of it is, but the direction has to be done by the business. So if somebody does wrong, then who gets the first kind of put it on this place and where they're accountable for? And I think it'll be the business. So business has to be more accountable, and they have to make sure that the others are accountable for that. But the execution is IT, in my view. So that's why both are responsible. When you talk about the GRC, governance, risk, and compliance side of it, that's a loose term for everything which is in there. If you think about that, then basically the GRC is execution, tool selection, finding the duplicates of any kind. It's in IT, but then the regulations has to be done by the legal department and by the business.
Thank you for that. So with that being said, what do you believe are some of the biggest operational challenges CIOs are facing as we're moving into this new world of generative AI and really rethinking business as a whole?
I think there are 2 or 3 challenges which I would say. Lack of a case definition. I think AI, like cloud initially, is a buzzword, and it's been there for the last couple of years. Now, what happens is that everything cannot be solved with an AI. AI is cool. So I think there is this coolness factor, but that you can remove that coolness factor for a moment because it comes to the nuts and bolts of it at the end of the day for everything. There is no shortcuts. So I think if you initially take some time, that's not like weeks and months, maybe a 2 or 3 weeks time frame, to identify the business case, that what is the value of that, what is the value proposition for that, and then strip it down to 1 or 2 things which are the most valuable one, are the ones which has to be there. The other thing which I would say is that, so it's like the feasibility study is not there. The second challenge I feel is that the AI and machine learning go hand in hand, because machine learning is about gathering information from places and then hit and trial and improve incrementally. Now, what happens is that there is a structured data and there is a unstructured data. If you are bringing in a structured data, it's a little bit easier. But when you bring in an unstructured data, to make sense out of it, I think there is this modeling concept have to be there. And then this experimentation is done less. So people just want to create something and then just take it to the market without experimentation of any kind. So I think that's something which I would say is important. And all of this exercise does not take long. It's maybe 2 weeks to 6 weeks of an exercise if somebody knows things. And third, I would say the data governance and the data ownership is a big problem. Now, it's like a minefield. You put your foot someplace, okay, it's an analogy only. If you put your foot someplace and you do not know, but then someplace down the line, you find out that that data was not something which you can use. And then you have to figure it out, what's the best way of doing that, or use a translation of some kind on the data. So I think the data ownership, data stewardship, or custodian of that is a big challenge. Technology is easy. Packaging it for something is the real challenge.
So speaking of the packaging, speaking of technology being so readily available and easy to implement within a open definition, what do you see and how do you see CIOs and executive teams measuring success when it comes to innovation, when it comes to digital transformation, when it comes to AI? What are you seeing in the market?
This is the real meat of the question. This is the core of the question, that I think the real problem comes in that think of an economic side of it. If you're not defining the demand clearly, then you're not supplying the solution properly. And I think the CIO's responsibility has morphed into not just maintaining and keep the lights on, but basically creation of a value for the company. I would say CIO's role should be about 30% maintaining the technology and about 70% to create value. Well, you can say maybe 20% for compliance as well, but it has to be 50% 20% for 30% for maintaining the old technology, 20% for compliance, but at least 50% for the value generation for the company. And C-level executives like myself, as a seat at the table, occasionally with the board, and we are also raising capital. So one has to know to articulate that how the value will be generated for the company. And I think that CIO's roles has morphed into that area. And the lines are blurry for the CIO and CTO these days. It's just technology officer in a matter of speaking. And then when you're sitting at a table, then you should be bringing more value to that and explaining that. For that, one needs to know technology and one needs to know financials. That's something, and people have to talk to the CMO, people have to talk to the legal department, that what are the challenges which they can potentially face, growth officers. Basically, they have to make this core where they are validating these ideas before they're moving forward.
That's a really good way of putting it. And when I was at IBM, we did a lot of MVP or very quick iterations to make an assumption, to validate against real people, whether it was internal or external, and then get into the hands as quickly as possible of that value proposition. So the time to value, meaning the time from an idea to delivering something that's usable, was in the shortest amount of time possible, and then you can build on top of that. And so that's a really good insight. In the last few minutes here, just some tactical recommendations, some tactical insights. What are some adoption strategies that you have seen on how companies can implement things like AI? Because it's a great buzzword, but at the end of the day, it comes down to you have employees, you've got team members, you have customers. What are some tactical things that CIOs can do to lead their team and to lead their business into implementation?
I think it comes down to tasting the technology, and essentially it's like creating some sort of a pilot program.
Okay.
Now, we can call it a pilot, we can call it just a narrow thing, but instead of doing everything at a single time, I think you have to create a cross section of 2 or 3 things for yourself as a technology team by validating that from a business side of it and making sure that pilot has a very clear goals and objectives defined, written, understood by people, and not like a list of 20 things, but maybe a list of less than 5 things. Fewer is better, but they are measurable. So if somebody creates a structure like that pilot, and then it can be expanded. So I want to quickly take a moment to share an example. One of the challenges which the real estate industry faces is the appraisal business. Appraisal is, on a good day, it takes 21 days. On a bad month, it could take maybe 1.5 months. So it is quite a bit of a range whenever. So when people decide that they want to buy a home, it's a very emotional thing. And people want to do that now sooner. And they have come to that decision after a long time. And then appraisal becomes a challenge. So one of the solutions, which I had created for one of the companies, which is used by Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae, is the condition of the house by using the photos. So the photos are there from the appraisal report previously done, but that previous data has to be available. So once you do that, and then it would read all the photos, the pixel level, and then see that what is the thickness of the granite in the kitchen or at different places in the house, bathrooms, the cleanliness. It would be directly related to the condition of that property. Now, I can go into all aspects of it, but I did not go into all aspects of it. I just went into the 2 or 3 aspects of it and then identified the condition and then verified with the banking industry that would they be okay to accept these results. And my goal was that the fluctuation of any valuation has to reduce from a 5% plus and minus to 2%.
Okay.
And that means risk mitigation. So risk is never eliminated, it's only mitigated. So once I created these clear definitions around that, I was able to create a pilot program for that condition for the properties, and then do that. So I think tactically, one needs to have a clear objectives, clear metrics, doing a pilot. It should be done. And I would say that one should not do a pilot which is 6 months long, because then people lose interest in it. Whatever it is, you got to turn it around very quickly. Any pilot should stand to, we should complete it within 6 weeks to 12 weeks time frame, and then that's it. So you got to turn that around very quickly, because then only you can keep the interest level up and then sell it. Because CIO role or technology leadership role is also about selling it to the internal people, because that means raising money, etc., and then seeing the value to that. I would say these are some of the tactical things which I would do to do that. And finally, I would say the team who's helping, they are the backbone of everything. They need to be completely bought in with that thing. It is not top down, I'm telling this, then you have to do that. It basically, they believe that there is a mission to that, and they are bought into that. So you create that honey jar where people get attracted to that. Now everybody wants to be a part of that. So you create that charisma around that project. So I think this is really important from a human element perspective.
That's really insightful. So with what you were just saying, are there any tools or systems that you have used to help qualify and quantify success so that you can take this pilot idea and come back to the businesses and say, this is what our assumption was, this is our result, and this is the impact and the value creation it's going to have long term? Any suggestions?
I would say tool wise, I would say it's more like using OKR method, objective and key results. And OKR is more important than KPIs, and then we can have a debate on a different level. But I think there are two schools of thought. OKRs is more tactical oriented, since we are talking about that. And then it is only measuring the numbers, and it's an incremental thing. OKRs basically connect the business goal to the tactical side of it. That disconnection is there, and the KPI side of it. So I think the process itself is to use any tool as simple as Excel to any of the products for the project management side of it, which can define that. One thing I would say, people fall into that trap very quickly. Over classification and creation of a micro tasks sometimes takes more time than actually doing the tasks itself.
Yes.
So I would say just restrict it to two levels, level 1 and level 2, maybe level 3. That way, there is a clear ownership of one person owning one task. One sure way, this is my favorite saying, one sure way that you want something not to be done is to give it to two people.
Yes.
And I think if you define the clear OKRs, I think that is the best outcome.
Fantastic. So one last question for you. In your opinion, what are things that CIOs should start and stop doing?
I think one thing I'll start with the things which they should be doing. Reduce meetings by 50%. Create 60 to 70% of the time for everyone in their organizations as a free time for work, like block time. Not free time means block time for them to work on something. That alone will create a space for everybody. Technology is a little bit like artwork. It clicks, a coding click. Okay, somebody has spent 4 hours, but it's not happening. You step back and then you come back, and then it just, voila, it just happens. So one has to create that kind of foster that environment to do that. Another thing which I have instituted, and I would say CIOs should do that, is to have a bad news meeting. Okay.
Okay.
I believe bad news, people stay away from the bad news because they think it's a reflection on them, even if they are not responsible for it and they are bringing it. Now, it's a human component of it, obviously, and then people just avoid that. If you say that you will be rewarded for the bad news, okay, you can create an incentive structure of some kind, not financial, but just an acknowledgement. Thank you for telling me sooner. If people will tell you things sooner, then you can actually act on those sooner, because there is no such thing as a master plan. Everything goes wrong at all the time. And the sooner you know it, the better you can. And then you need people in the leadership who have this punching power, that they can take that sparring and then they can deal with that and then sort it out and then classify what is more important than the other one. And then, so I would say these are a couple of things which I would say CIOs should be doing. I think many CIOs has a complacency factor. So I think they should stop doing that, because if somebody is in some sort of a role, there was a firefight, and then they become a person who just keep the lights on and not looking at the growth factor is a really bad thing. And then one more thing which is coming to my mind is that everybody in the CIO's role needs to know, and they don't do it, is to tell a story. Tell a story. They should, okay, since I'm talking what not to be said, is they should not talk technical. They should actually talk simple language. That this is going to do this, this is going to do this. Okay. Nobody likes when a doctor is telling you a complicated medicine names. Lawyers are using lawyerly words. Okay. That projection is there in the technology field, and to some degree in every field of some kind. And I think it's a show off. So people should stop doing that. I think one will have more success if they can communicate very simply and clearly to people.
These are such insightful perspectives, and I love the bad idea meeting, because you have to try new things. You have to be able to fail forward. And when that is celebrated, it gives people a chance to try to be innovative, because there's safety in making a mistake. Don't do the same thing twice, and learn from your mistakes. But by creating and fostering that environment, I think it allows the humanness to come through, and it allows those who have good ideas to bring them to the table and not be afraid of true failure or risk of losing their job. So I thought that was incredible. So how can the audience get in contact with you if they want to find out more, or if they want to engage with you?
You can share my contact information.
Okay.
And if anybody has any further clarifications, questions, or want to go more deeper into any of the topics on technology side, on AI side, or investment side, that what can bring the more growth to the company, or acquisition, or beyond acquisition of the customer, I meant, or going beyond the US border. So I have a lot of experience in European Union and Asia Pacific. I've made multiple trips there, fortunately. So I think any kind of such areas, I will be very delighted to be a part of that.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us today on Heartbeat. Until next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.